Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
You know, it's 15 top blokes, me, surrounded by 8,000 Arsenal. And then they start singing No One Likes Us in the middle of the Arsenal North Bank. And I'm like, singing No One Likes Us, and in my head I'm going to fucking die here. And it just fucking, the thing about football is it had that eerie silence before everything fucking goes horribly wrong. So it just went completely silent, like completely fucking silent. And everyone moved out. And the first geezer stepped forward and started coming towards me because I was the smallest. And the guy who was next to me, as he came towards me, steps in front of me and just went, and just hit this geezer fucking squarely on the nose, and he just went, bosh.
Good evening. Tonight, we take a detailed look back at one of the most notorious incidents of football hooliganism during the 1980s. The date was January 9th, 1988. The match, Arsenal versus Millwall at Highbury. What should have been an FA Cup third-round tie turned into one of the most violent clashes between rival firms of the decade. With 41 arrests, injuries to supporters and police, and headlines across the country, this was football violence at its peak. In the late 1980s, football in Britain was already facing a crisis. Violence and disorder had plagued the game for more than a decade, with hooligan firms attached to many major clubs. Millwall, whose Bushwackers were among the most feared firms in the country, carried a reputation for violence that stretched well beyond South London. Arsenal, meanwhile, had their own hooligan element, the Herd. The stage for January 1988 was set. Police prepared for trouble, but few could have predicted the scale of the disorder that would follow. Millwall made the short trip to Islington for an FA Cup third-round game. What could go wrong? Well, 500 specially trained police officers were unable to contain terrifying violence as Arsenal and Millwall fans clashed. There were 48 arrests and 60 people thrown out of the ground. A tube train was smashed up at Arsenal Station. 2 pubs, the Arsenal Tavern in Blackstock Road and Plimsoll Arms in St Thomas's Road, were completely wrecked. The Plimsoll Arms was left without a single window. PC Robin Harmon suffered a broken leg when a fan forced him off balance and then jumped on him. And cops were pelted with so many coins inside the stadium that they later collected £13.59 for their kitty. The Gazette's Arsenal correspondent was there, as a peaceful law-abiding gooner, we might add. Thousands of Millwall supporters travelled across London to Highbury. From the outset, tension was clear. Inside the ground, isolated scuffles broke out between the Herd and the Bushwackers. Chairs and coins were thrown. The worst violence erupted outside the stadium. Pubs were smashed. Streets became battle zones. And one police officer suffered a broken leg. By the end of the day, 41 arrests had been made. One Arsenal fan that was there said this. "I was 14 or 15, he recalls. I used to go to the Arsenal with my pals, and we decided to go in the North Bank that day. You could feel something in the air. It felt nasty." The clock end was properly rammed with 12,000 Millwall fans. In those days, Arsenal would only get about 30,000 people at games, so you would know the familiar faces. But there was this big mob of geezers in the North Bank I'd never seen before. I don't know if it was before or after kick-off, but there was this massive roar of Millwall. It just went bonkers, and these blokes in the North Bank kicked off on anyone they could find, and this revved up everyone in the Millwall end too. I remember walking back to Finsbury Park after the game, and every window in the Plimsoll Arms in St Thomas's Road had been smashed up. It was pretty crazy. The Gazette asks another Gooner, who has worked in Islington since 1983, if he can recall the violence. The British press condemned the violence. Headlines called it mindless thuggery and a national disgrace. Images of bloodied fans and smashed property dominated newspapers. Local residents described the streets as a battlefield. The incident reinforced the perception that football hooliganism was out of control. This is what Jeremy Corbyn said about it all. "Yes, I do remember it," a stern-faced Jeremy Corbyn replies instantly. "I wasn't at the match, but I certainly picked it up the day after." The Plimsoll Arms pub was trashed by Millwall supporters. Absolutely shocking. A shocking event in the history of our borough. This was, don't forget, at the height of football hooliganism. And it went without saying that Millwall had a reputation. To be fair, this sort of thing happened every week. Football was a different world back then. I've got a lot of respect for Millwall as a club. I used to watch England, and whenever I bumped into Millwall fans, they would look back at that game. Their fans wanted to prove themselves off the pitch as a top-level club. No one remembers the actual game on the pitch. Arsenal won 2-0. Lath continues. That game was almost the end of an era for hooliganism. Hillsborough happened the year after. It showed how football fans had been treated like second-class citizens. Watching the Arsenal was a lot more raw back then. Everyone was in it together, and you would expect a little bit of trouble as long as you weren't caught up in it. The game has been sanitised since then, and that's a good thing because it's allowed more people to get into the best sport in the world. It was the most frightening thing of my life. Unsurprisingly, the Gazette called police into question after the game. But Archie Newlands, who was in charge of the operation, said at the time, "We did all we could. Our plans, which were to keep the fans apart for as long as we could, worked. You can only plan to contain it. You can't stop it." We also spoke to Arsenal Tavern landlady Jeanette Moynihan. "We'd been warned by police that there might be trouble," she said in 1988, "but we never expected anything like what happened. Everything erupted about 1:30 p.m. We heard shouting and chanting. People suddenly started surging forward. It was the most frightening thing of my life. They slashed seats and threw glasses at each other. Within seconds, we didn't have one glass left. One woman climbed onto a pool table and started telling who to hit who. People were diving behind the bar to try and escape, and one of the windows was broken by a customer trying to get away from it all. It was like another world, and yet the whole thing was over in about 5 to 8 minutes. The Football Association faced pressure to act. Politicians called for stricter measures, while police expanded surveillance and crowd control. The event contributed to later reforms, including all-seater stadiums and the Football Spectators Act. For Millwall, the incident cemented their fearsome reputation. The Bushwackers were already notorious, but Highbury reinforced their notoriety. Arsenal's herd also gained notoriety, proving hooliganism was not confined to smaller clubs. The 1988 Highbury incident was part of a wider national problem in football. Ordinary fans were intimidated, and clubs faced pressure to change. The violence highlighted the urgent need for reforms in stadium safety and policing. Eyewitnesses described streets filled with running battles. One shopkeeper stated, "The match was over hours ago, but outside it was still chaos. We were scared to even go out and lock up former hooligans," admit both firms arrived expecting violence. January 9th, 1988, Arsenal versus Millwall was not just a football match. It was a defining moment in English football hooliganism, with 41 arrests, serious injuries, and national outrage. This day remains a stark reminder of the dark side of the game in the 1980s. This is what one Millwall that was there had to say about the game. The following is all his own words on the social media platform called X, formerly called Twitter. This was a bloodbath. Plimsoll Arms and Arsenal Tavern got wrecked. Gooners smashed all over the manor before the game, and then they had their moment at Highbury Fields. A proper day out. Arsenal v Millwall, FA Cup, 1988. But now, let's hear from the actual Millwall Bushwackers. This is their account of events. He had drawn Arsenal in the cup. Everyone was buzzing with the idea of a trip to Highbury to see what Arsenal had to offer. After some careful planning, we decided to go straight into their manor and put on a good show. We knew that their boys would be drinking in the Arsenal Tavern, one of their main pubs. We set off on the Saturday morning with a tidy firm that was no more than 30 strong. Yet, everyone was a proper chap, and everyone knew each other. It was better that way because, when it kicked off, there was no confusion over who was who. We got to North London, and just round the corner from the Arsenal Tavern, we gathered for a team talk. Our plan was to get in the pub by going in 3 or 4 at a time. When we were all in, it would kick off. Me and 2 of my mates went in and started playing pool. Looking about, there were most of their top boys in here. Great, because they were about to meet 30 of ours. We mingled in with all the normal fans, and little pockets of us were all over the pub. You are pretending to play pool, but the adrenaline is flowing, and we are waiting for the shout. It soon comes. Every little group of us had our targets in sight. Someone threw a pint glass behind the jump bar, and we were away. The pool cues in our hands were now being used to attack a group of Arsenal standing by the pool table. I hit one across the nose, and blood poured from it straight away. Someone hit him with a bottle, and he collapsed in a heap. As I looked around, there were bodies everywhere and smashed glass all over the floor. There were people lying on the floor screaming while getting kicked and cut by the glass underneath them. It was like a Wild West pub fight. Chairs being hit off people's heads, but not smashing like the films. Just people hitting the floor from the weight of the heavy stools. Tables were turned over by some Arsenal trying to escape out of the front door. I pulled one of them back, grabbed onto his shirt and hit him around the side of the head with a pint glass I had just picked up. He fell to the floor in a ball, not moving. He was either spark out or thought he'd play dead until it was all over. The air was filled with people moaning and screaming. Anytime anyone moved, I heard the sound of breaking glass. For a split second, we all stood still and surveyed the scene before rushing out of the pub. As we came out, I tried to move my hand but couldn't feel my fingers. When I had glassed the fellow, the glass had sliced my hand open and my fingertips were dripping with blood. I kept walking away from the pub because I was no use to anyone with a busted hand. Plus, it would not take Poirot to work out I had just come from the pub with loads of gooners cut to ribbons. On the bus away from Arsenal, my hand was clenched tight in my pocket. By the time I got back home to Walworth, it looked like a big fucked up cricket ball. Fucking great fun though. The whole plan from start to finish had worked a fucking treat. The Arsenal Tavern and all who drank in her had been smashed up good. The Bushwackers now go into detail about another clash with Arsenal and the Herd. This is what they said. Monday, 10th January 1994, we had drawn Arsenal in the FA Cup at the New Den. The season before, we had played them in the League Cup. With a sellout crowd on a cold winter's night, we fancied our chances. We held our own, but they scored right at the end after Casey Keller was fouled. So we were looking to get some revenge on the Arsenal fans. A small group of us made our way up the road towards the Old Kent Road. As we turned the corner, there was a group of Arsenal hooligans being herded by the police, certainly not enough to keep us from getting at each other. There were about 10 coppers, 20 Arsenal and 15 of us. The ones at the front, about 4 or 5 of us, ran straight at the Arsenal. They braced themselves for an attack. All those at the front got a few lefts and rights in, but before any real damage could get done, the old Bill on horses came in and broke it up. The police numbers were now enough to control the situation. The mounted police charged into us to disperse us, and we jumped over a little metal fence into a small park and made our way out the gates and off round the back streets. We had just been involved in a fight. Old Bill found us and they nicked us. They escorted Arsenal to safety. It was almost exactly a year later when, for the third year running, we drew Arsenal again in a cup competition. We hoped to get a result third time lucky, and after being robbed the season before, we were fired up. Once again, we provided a hostile atmosphere for our North London rivals, with Ian Wright getting some serious stick. The Arsenal chant of Ian Wright, right, right was hijacked by Millwall and turned into Ian Wank, wank, wank. The abuse Wright and the other Arsenal players received throughout the game really levelled things up on the pitch. The match ended 0-0 with us having some good chances. After the game, we went to the Jolly Gardeners on Rotherhithe New Road to try and cut off the escort. As they got near the pub, we went outside, ready to attack. However, the police had got the situation under control, keeping Arsenal back and us outside the pub. Then the sky lit up. Arsenal had fired a flare at us, and it just whistled past the geezer's head next to me. It was still burning on the floor outside the pub. The police contained us there while they escorted Arsenal to Surrey Quay Station. We did not want to leave it there and decided to go after them. Our mob of about 40 went into Southwark Park and used the dark of the park to keep hidden from the main road. We headed to Surrey Quays to make our way to Whitechapel Station, thinking Arsenal would be waiting for us. On arrival, we ran off the train and up the platform. We were rushing out of the station and came under a barrage of missiles, bottles, bricks, and another flare. They had managed to arm themselves with anything they could get their hands on while waiting for us. We ran towards them, all the time coming under heavy bombardment. They were being held back by the police on Whitechapel Road. They kept us apart by hitting us back with truncheons and shields, while the missiles from Arsenal were still coming. The old Bill pushed us still further back towards Whitechapel Hospital. We were getting nicked now, as they had started to handcuff a few of our boys, while they had us pinned to the railings of the hospital. Some Arsenal had broken through the police lines on the opposite side of the road. The coppers holding us panicked, opening up a gap, and we saw our chance. 3 of us shot through. We jumped over the railings into the road, then jumped the second set of railings to face the mob. As we landed, their mob scattered. We chased a small group of about 8 down Fulbourn Street. 3 of them stopped to front us, and 1 of them came at me. As he got close, I threw a big uppercut, connecting straight on the chin. He went down like a sack of shit. From behind me, I heard, "Stop! Police! Head down!" I started sprinting. I had just slipped away from them once, and there was no way they were catching me. I was gone. No idea how long the police chased me for. You do not stop and look behind you in those situations. You run. You get away, then you worry about where you are later. You don't care about the fact that you're heading north. You get the F out of Dodge City. Tubes are a no-go, as descriptions are probably out already. Some faces do not need describing. They are already known, and mine was in this category. For all you know, there could have been serious trouble all round the ground. Police could be crawling all over the tube stations in a mile or 2 radius of the ground. It was a 2-mile yomp in the dark to Tower Bridge. Head down and a quick walk, trying to look as inconspicuous as possible without trying to overdo it, because then you look totally conspicuous. Cutting through the back streets, I had to double back on myself to get back on the right side of the Thames. When I got to Tower Bridge, I felt safe. I did not think the old Bill would pick me up going over the bridge. Once over the bridge, you are home free, on the right side of the river, and hoping old Bill have got their hands full where you have just come from. It probably took over 40 minutes to get back to the pub. Better a 45-minute walk and a few pints than a 1-minute tube ride and a rest. Cells, court appearances, fines and bans. Yes, give me that 45-minute walk any day of the week. None of the boys were back in the pub before me. A couple came back later. They had it on their toes after they had a little ruck. A few got nicked and held with details taken before being released. Maybe it was a bit of cocaine paranoia But I'd gone from flying and on top of the world to absolute sobriety, with a feeling of self-consciousness and a need to be back in a safe zone. I felt extra happy to be back in the warmth of the Gregorian for a few pints before closing. When the old bills start nicking, it is every man for himself at that stage. As everyone knows, it is all about getting away from them. I did it the hard way that night. All in all though, not a bad trip across the river. Could have been better, no old Bill stopping us getting at Arsenal. It could have been worse though, old Bill nicking even more of us. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.